Today's episode is brought to you by Media for All, which was set up to help encourage more Black, Asian, and other ethnic talent into media, and to provide a support and mentoring network to ensure talent flourishes in the media industry that we all love. If you're looking for a mentor or would like to mentor young ethnic talent, check them out at mediaforall.org.uk, and it is all 100% free.
Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Ollerton. I'm the founder of Automated Creative, and this is a podcast about the future of marketing. Every week or so, I have the pleasure and the privilege of interviewing one of our industry's leaders, and this week is no different. I'm on a call, as ever these days, with Richard Davila, who is head of marketing for UK and Europe at Malaysia Airlines. Richard, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Could you give the audience a bit of a background on who you are and what you do?
Thank you, Tom. Currently, I'm looking after the marketing, as Tom mentioned, for UK and Europe. So what this means is anything that's marketing related would I would be involved in for the region. Everything from B2C, B2B, B2B2C, also all of the digital optimization and development plans, which would have an eventual use for to reach out to our customers in the different markets in this region, and also in terms of the new products that we're launching and campaigns as well. So anything related to marketing for the airline in this region. Prior to that, I've been doing that for 3 years. But prior to that, I was promoting the Philippines here in the UK for Northern and Southern Europe, working for the tourist board. And so I've always been, and I've been doing that for more than 10 years. So I've always been in the travel space.
Fantastic. So before we get on to your shiny new object, we're going to just have a discussion about some of the things that help you do what you do. And the first question is around, what is the most useful thing that you have bought with your own money that you use for work?
At the moment, it's quite topical. So I've been lucky enough to be able to purchase my first flat in the UK, in London. Uh, After the lockdown ended throughout this pandemic. And it's useful because we're now working from home. At least in our company, we've been working from home since March. It's useful to be able to have a lot of now free space, uh, sometimes faster internet connection, and also to have the flexibility to do what you need at any given time. Given that our head office is in Kuala Lumpur, which is about 8 hours ahead, in the time zone, it gives that bit of more flexibility, given that you don't need to travel physically to the office and back.
And so, what has surprised you most about working from home in this way?
The amount of meetings that you're able to do and cover within a day, which previously, let's say 2019, 3 meetings, you'd be done for the day, given the travel time to go into central London, whether they're meeting in your office or you're meeting in theirs. Uh, you're able to cram a lot of meetings within a single day. And also you get meeting fatigue by the end of the day, but still having to do the work on top of that in the evenings as well. So that was quite surprising.
And I love the idea that your house is a investment for work. Brilliant. Definitely not had that one before. But what else have you invested in the last few years that have been a really useful investment of your time or energy?
I think the best piece that if I have to, in terms of time, energy, or money, time number one, and it will continue on, not just over the past few years, but even moving forward. Surrounding yourself with the right people, spending more time with the people that you will learn from, whether it's in the same industry or other industries as well. Especially in marketing, we work through so many different verticals. I tend to attend quite a lot of conferences, especially recently, and learning from different leaders in their own fields and their different challenges. Spending time with them. Also going to spend more time with your current bosses, previous bosses as well, when working with them in the past, and just learning from them. And I think that alone is one of the biggest investments that you can make.
And so tell me how you decide which conferences to attend. And we are going to talk about conferences in a lot more detail later, but how do you work out which ones are going to be good? Is it a case of just looking at the speakers, or is it topics, or is it a combination of both those things?
A combination of both. I guess chiefly is one, if you're invited to it to speak, and number two is which will come up quite a lot, is relevancy. How relevant is it to your current challenges? What your key takeaways? Will it add value to your day to day, to your job? Are you able to quickly apply those lessons to what you're currently doing to meet the challenges you're currently facing? Relevancy would be the key takeaway from that.
And how do you approach conferences? Do you sort of decide exactly who you're going to see, or do you just, you know, toss a coin and see who comes up, or do you make sure you see specific talks about specific subjects?
Specific talks about specific subjects, particularly if you have similar challenges that you are facing on your day-to-day role at the given time, and also projecting to, are those challenges some things that you will be facing in the next year or two? Then yes, I'd be wanting to be attending that.
And so one thing that always confuses me about events is marrying up your need as an audience to understand a certain topic, like you just described, versus why that person is on stage speaking in the first place. Because the person on the stage invariably is wanting to sell something, whether it's them or their belief or their company or their expertise or, you know, personality or whatever it is. So what they want to get out of it is some form of adulation, recognition, some kind of response, and more than likely some form of revenue or sales, maybe directly or indirectly. But you want to learn, and don't you think there's a tension there? And how do you resolve that tension?
Not necessarily. Like, for example, I was in a panel this morning. It was called the Virtual Marketing Summit. I was in a panel with Facebook and Sodexo, and it was a knowledge share. There was nothing about it that people were trying to sell. It's just a shared common knowledge, and we're fortunate enough to be in marketing that quite a lot of things are actually shared for the greater good, in the sense that if you have specific challenges, it's good to know that other industries are facing those as well, and they are looking at it in a different way that you might not have seen yet, but also to get that validation if you're on the right path. They've also done the same steps along to solve those problems as well. So it's not always about a specific technology provider that's trying to sell you something. There's also quite a lot, and I've been fortunate enough to be invited to a few of those that it's pretty much a knowledge share. There's no selling bit attached to it. Of course, there are ones as well that they need that for to run the event for revenue perspective, but not all of the conferences that and events are always there to sell something.
I think you're being very kind to Facebook in that scenario, but I take your I take your point. So, what new belief or behavior has changed the way that you work in the last 5 years?
Use your time wisely. So, in terms of when you do have holiday dates that you need to use, don't give those up. I think that's a belief that's common, at least here in Europe, that we do love our holidays and we do take it off. You need it to refresh. Do this by visiting new countries when you get the chance. That's probably one of the reasons why I work for an airline. I've always been in travel. I've set a goal in the past 3 years to visit 4 new countries a year. I've been successfully doing that for the past 3 years, and stopped this year for obvious reasons.
And in terms of going to 4 new countries a year, I would love to know which countries you visited that have really struck you as unusual from a marketing perspective. Have you been somewhere and thought, oh, this is different, this is odd? Or are you just completely switched off from marketing when you're in those places?
Yes and no. So, for example, like the last country, new one that I visited in 2019 was Cambodia and Siem Reap. What I found out there is that the people were very genuinely nice. And fortunate enough to experience that they're not there to hard sell you local attractions or goods. They're just genuinely nice. So it's nice to go to a country where to experience that in a country when in a marketing perspective, sometimes you are prepared to have that wall in front of you to if you know you're being hard sold to, whether it's a tour, a local attraction, or a thing that you need to visit that you don't really want to sometimes. But it's good to be in a country where they're generally hospitable.
This episode of the Shiny New Object podcast is brought to you in partnership with MadFest. Whether it's live in London or streamed online to the global marketing community, you can always expect a distinctive and daring blend of fast-paced content, startup innovation pitches, and unconventional entertainment from MadFest events. You'll find me causing trouble on stage, recording live versions of this podcast, and sharing a beer with the nicest and most influential people in marketing. Check it out at www.madfestlondon.com. So we're kind of roughly at the halfway stage now, and what we're going to talk about is your shiny new object, which is so different to any other guest we've had before. I'm really interested to hear your take on it. And it is virtual events and conferencing. And here we are in the UK in the middle of lockdown number 2, the revenge, the return of the lockdown. And I was so surprised but excited to hear you say that you wanted to talk about virtual and events and conferencing as a in the context of the future of marketing. So I think anyone listening to this podcast will understand what those things are, but I would love to know why you're so passionate about that.
Uh, as covered also earlier, thank you, Tom, was that we're actually attending more and more of these virtual events and conferences as we would have done in previous years. And also, it's good to see the different features that some of these platforms are currently providing that we wouldn't have thought to look for previously, but also checking out what conferences are able to do virtual as opposed to live events. Of course, we all miss live events. We all look forward to the time where we can do those again. But what advantages these live virtual conferences do at this time in that we're not able to do live events?
And so tell me about those pros and cons. What are you seeing from virtual events that you weren't getting from real events? And what do you miss about those in-person moments?
For the virtual events, of course, would be the ability to condense quite a lot of information. So a conference that normally would probably have taken 2 days, you can do it over the span of 1 day now, and you're able to do those in quick succession. So the one that I attended this morning, it was a global one. They were able to do the poor organizer. They were able to do the Asia Pacific one and the Europe one back to back, given the time zone difference. So a lot of them were staying up to do both. And also, you're able to get attendees across the globe tuning in live at any specific time. They don't also the travel cost. They don't need to travel very far. They can take 2 steps and open link. And also the cost of running these are dramatically reduced. Instead of putting everybody into a hotel, renting the logistics of that, and the organization, which normally takes months, given the right platform, you're able to condense it into the registration process, making sure your program is well constructed and going from there. In terms of the disadvantages, yes, we all relish the time when we can meet our co-attendees and co-speakers in person and exchanging that rapport after the event has finished, after the day's event has finished. and building from that. That strong relationship is not always translated to virtual events. Sometimes it can, but not as strong as if you did the live events. And also, for example, like I work in travel, it's an industry that thrives in making strong relationships. And for example, like World Travel Market, one of the biggest travel events that's currently going on. It's currently live now. It's all digital. That's normally attended by 55,000 visitors and exhibitors over the span of 3 days. What you miss is you miss bumping into people through the halls of Excel in London that you haven't seen in a year or two, and just having that quick catch up, and also the post event activity after that event has finished throughout the day. You have all the awards and events run by different organizers and suppliers well into the evening. So it, instead of it being just about the business, you're also making it about the connections. So that's also that we're looking forward to. That can't be completely replaced by virtual events. And also moving on to the features as well, where over the past few months we've experienced platforms that excel in these features that are seamless. So you're not noticing any shift between putting poll questions, putting screen shares, running the slides across, and some noticing some as well that could be better. One of the ones that do it really well, ON24. That's the one that I was on earlier. That was really quite slick. And in terms of connecting, they had a link to everybody's LinkedIn in the bottom, so people can connect via that. Some that don't do it quite well, that you have to fill up a profile and before. So essentially, it's lessening and just improving the customer journey in the UI.
And so, what do you think the future of this space is? Because there's talk of a vaccine. Maybe we're going to go back to the normal conference. Maybe we'll have to social distance a bit. Maybe some countries won't be able to have them. But do you think that conference organizers will produce different live events or different in-person events based on what they've learned this time?
There is certainly room for both. There is certainly room to do live events. There's also certain room to more virtual events as well. So it's getting to have a succinct message that is brand new, that offers something relevant to your prospective attendees. So there's certainly a room to do both. There might not be as many live events moving forward, but of course that there will be live events, certainly, when we're all ready to do that. But in terms of going back to what you said in terms of the social distancing, once there's a vaccine, so that was positive news earlier this week, so we're looking forward to that. Hopefully some semblance of normality comes back by mid next year. But as we know, that events and conferences, the live ones, take months to organize. So in the interim, you'll have quite a few virtual events. But I think, like, looking forward to like 2-3 years from now, you'll have both. What you'll have is more events that you were able to do in 2019. You'll have both virtual and live events happening at the same time. Maybe
So
different frequencies, but there's room for both.
One of the things that I've noticed with the live events that I've been involved in is that the live events have shortened and shortened and shortened the length of presentations to some point, like 99 seconds for a presentation. And it's been amazing how brilliant some of those presentations have been. And I wonder if the impact of the new level of data that conferences have will affect live conferences. Because if you're at a conference and someone becomes boring and you start looking at your phone or open your laptop, the conference organizer has got no way of knowing that's what happened. Whereas on a online conference, they can see what the drop off and what the average view time was and all the rest of it. So I think that finally conference organizers have now got actual user data, whereas before they just had sort of attendee numbers and had a vague sense of how many people were at each talk or whatever. But fundamentally, it seems to me the conference organizers have recognized the fact that actually people want shorter presentations. Or do you think I've misread that?
No, you perfectly put it. As we all know, like data is very much key, and how you study that data and track that behavior uh, is only a positive thing in terms of for the organizers, that they'll be using those data on their virtual side to track and how they can optimize their live events better, to make sure that when they do live events, it's they can keep all their speakers engaged with the participants and their listeners, and keeping it to a format and a time that will only be more and more optimized as we have more of this information to learn from. And the moment that you put machine learning to these conferences as well, I'm sure it's already happening. It can only serve to optimize the entire experience for both the presenter and the listener.
And do you think there's a different skill when it comes to presenting at an online conference versus a in-person conference? Do you think that if you're a good storyteller and have good slides and are engaging, that it doesn't matter what format you're on? Or does being on a virtual conference suit an introvert perhaps versus someone who's might be more intimidated by being stood on stage in front of hundreds of people?
Yeah, it depends on the person, I think. But also, as you put it well, is that someone who has stage fright, they're only looking at a screen, but they probably might be intimidated by looking in front of live hundreds of people live. So that's one. But also, it's practice. The more and more you do it, the more comfortable you're able to become. In terms of the presenting, whether it's live or virtual, they both have the same challenges, so to speak. If you're presenting or it's a pre-recorded activity, um, you will only on a different level. You'll still face the same challenges, but practice does make for a better experience.
So it sounds like you've been to a lot more online conferences than I have. I'm sure that's true. So, what advice would you give to a marketer who is listening to this podcast who has got a virtual event coming up? What are the kind of key things to do and the key things not to do in a virtual conference environment?
If they're presenting, keep it simple. Know your topic really full well and back, because there will be eventually Q&As for that. Can be live Q&A, so you have to know your topic very well. Uh, Keep your slides very relevant, and keep your message relevant, that you know that you're presenting something that will be solving someone's problems that they'll want to hear and learn from, uh, not just in your industry, in your specific company, but also has application to different companies and to different industries and verticals as well. And we're lucky in marketing that it's very much cross industry solutions that we're learning from and providing as well.
So I noticed in the last 2 days that both Mondelez and BT, British Telecom, I think well Mondelez certainly were live on LinkedIn. I checked out both of those feeds quite briefly. But what do you think about the move of brands moving into the live space, and whether that's conferencing or something like LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook Live? Do you think that is a trend that's going to outlive lockdown?
I think it will. I think the ones that have uh, high engagement or continue to demonstrate that people will tune in at that specific time. The good thing about it is that it can always be revisited again, even if a person is not able to tune in at that specific time. They can watch and listen to it again after, as long as you provide the same links. So that will endure for sure. And people want to find out what new development is going on at the specific time. Again, if it's relevant to them, they will tune in.
So we're getting towards the end of the podcast now. if someone wanted to book you to speak at their event or reach out and speak to you about the work you do or your opinions on virtual events and conferencing, how would you like them to do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Thank you very much, Tom.
And I always ask this question, but what makes a really good outreach to you? So you must get tons of LinkedIn messages and you must get annoyed by that. What makes a really good one? So I can make sure that any messages that come from this podcast are valuable to you.
The best outreach in terms of cold messaging would be telling an interesting travel story, starting with that. That would always get your interest, get my interest, certainly.
Oh, fantastic. What a brilliant bit of advice. Richard, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I will see you at a virtual conference before too long.
And hopefully live. Thank you very much, Tom, for inviting.
Hi, just before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review of the Shiny New Object podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever it's called these days, or whichever podcast provider you use. We're an indie podcast, so it would go a long way for us if you could just share the word and give us a bit of a support on those channels. That would just be fantastic. If you haven't got time, that's also cool. And yeah, if you could tell your colleagues about the podcast, and also, if possible, don't forget to subscribe. And I'd love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to speak on the podcast or be a guest, or you think I'm asking the wrong questions, anything, I'd be super interested to hear what you think. So please email me at tom@automatedcreative.net. That's TOM at, I'm not going to bother spelling it. Anyway, you'll work it out. Thanks so much.